The True Ambition podcast with John Zink is brought to you by IT Avalon. IT Avalon, IT staffing and professional services done right. Visit our sponsor at itavalon.com. Now, welcome to True Ambition.
Welcome to the True Ambition podcast. My name is John Zink, and I'm honored today to be joined by an old friend of mine, Mr. Rich Brzozy. And Rich is senior relationship consultant at CAI, which stands for Computer Aid Incorporated. Now, Rich lives in Naperville, Illinois. And he was born in Lublin, Poland. He's got his wife, Aldona, son, Brian, and his daughter, Kimberly. And now, Rich, thanks so much for joining me today here on the True Ambition podcast.
Thanks for having me, John.
You bet. So you and I go back a long way. So You and I worked for you. I worked for someone who worked for you years ago at Agilent Consulting.
We worked together.
Yeah, we all worked together. There's no doubt about it. We were all in the same common cause. But I worked for Dave Androsco, and Dave's going to be on the podcast here in a few weeks. Unfortunately, just found out that Dave's dad passed away recently.
Oh gosh.
So.
I have to call him, John.
Yeah, give him a buzz. Dave's one of the best, and I was lucky to work for him and work with you too. So that was a fun company to work for, and that was because of the leadership there. And I was lucky to have worked for guys like yourself. And tell me, how long did you work for Agilent, and how did you start with Agilent? Just kind of give me a little bit of history there.
Well. To give you some background, Agilent was a company that was owned by Adecco. And Adecco is the largest temporary services company in the world ranked by revenue. And they're basically a combination of a French and a German firm. And they have access to a lot of money. So instead of growing companies organically, they typically have an acquisition strategy where they go to a market and buy into that market. So Agilent was a company that was put together through a number of acquisitions they made back in the 80s and 90s. And, probably when you and I were there, they're adding incrementally. So I actually came through one of the acquisitions. And I worked for a company very briefly. It's almost not, relevant to the resume, but I worked for a company that was based in New York, where I was assistant to the COO. And then one day I got a phone call saying, get on the airplane and meet us in Philadelphia. And I was like, why in Philadelphia? They're like, don't ask any questions, just be there.
Just go.
And like a good soldier, I got on the airplane and went. And we found out that Agilent acquired us. That's when I met Steve Claggett, you remember,
right? And
I remember fondly, and some of the other people that you and I worked with, at Agilent. Dave Androsco was with another acquisition that was acquired by what turned out to be Agilent. So by the time Agilent was put together, it was about $1 billion corporation. So I came through an acquisition. Once we felt each other out, they gave me additional responsibility. I wound up running a big chunk of their business in the Midwest, which included Minneapolis, which, by the way, was a very successful operation. One of the more successful operations that I think Agilent had. And as evidenced, as you know, by the trips we've taken and some of the rewards that we've had, an opportunity to partake of. So that was that was a great acquisition. Now, Agilent is no more, as you know.
Yeah. Now it's Modus now, right?
Well, back in 1999. So again, given a backdrop of Adecco having access to a lot of revenue, a lot of money, a lot of equity money,
right?
When things go south, with the companies they acquire for whatever reason, maybe it's mismanagement, maybe it's economic hardship, they typically go out and buy another company, declare victory, and move on. So things weren't going so well with Adecco USA. Things were going well with Agilent, but Agilent was a very small piece. We used to say that at Agilent, they made 13 times the revenue, we made 7 times their profit. So I mean, it was, whether that was factual or not, I think it was pretty close to the truth. They made a lot of revenue, but very scant amounts of dollars and cents. We made less revenue, but at the same time, they were in charge. They were in control. So they bought a company called the MPS Group, which had an IT subsidiary called Modus. And Modus came in and took over. So basically, when that happened, all the people who were in VP positions, and that's essentially what wound up happening to just about everybody there at a VP title. They wound up, getting released or getting retired early or getting an early out. And it was it was a pretty happy time.
Yeah. I was lucky. I was out of there before all that crap happened.
I know, but it was a happy time. Even I think for the most part, people that came out of there were relatively happy. Adecco made sure that we were well taken care of on our way out the door. And, I think if you look at Modus now, Modus is probably at best, $300-400 million, which sounds impressive. But think about that. They were $1 billion corporation. And then Modus itself was probably $500 million or more.
Right.
So you took $1.5 billion worth of revenue and shrank it down to about, a third of that, right? At best. But anyway, so I'm thinking that Adecco will probably acquire another IT services company if there is such a thing left, and declare victory and move on. But they've had a lot of reorganizations, as you know, a lot of people that and I know who are friends of mine. There's very, very few people left who are still there. They've had a lot of reorgs. I mean, they even got rid of Dave, right?
Yeah. I know Mark Mahachek's still there.
Well, he's probably
going nuts.
I can't figure that one out, but more power to him.
Oh yeah, no, I talked to him the other day, and I told him I was gonna be talking to you, and he said to say hello.
Okay, good. No, he's a great recruiter, and he's in a position where they need him more than he needs them. I guess is what it comes down to.
Well, Agilent was one of those things that Agilent changed my life, because I was coming out of 9/11 where the whole industry was crazy. And I went into the mortgage business for a little bit. And then I went and interviewed with Lisa Lindborg, and she hired me. And I came in there, and then Lisa got demoted or something. I can't remember exactly what happened. Then Dave became my boss. And then I went to a training seminar in Florida and met Carissa, my now wife, and all these things happened. That was actually a negotiation skills seminar or training seminar in Orlando, Florida, where Carissa was there, and I learned how to negotiate.
It couldn't have been better training, right?
Yeah, better at the training, and the rest is history. I ended up in California, and now we got our beautiful little baby Johnny, and it's all thanks to Agilent.
Congratulations.
So life is good. I had a question for you. Now, being born in Poland, did you grow up there? How long were you in Poland?
Well, I came to this country when I was 12 years old.
Okay. So had to be a big transition there.
Well, when you're, I guess, there's some parts to that which are fortunate. So when you're younger, you tend to be more like, a little more flexible maybe than if you were older.
Right.
So I learned English pretty quickly, lost my accent pretty quickly. I was in a very, very good environment school-wise. So,
Where did your family move to?
Worcester, Massachusetts area, central Mass. So my brother still lives in Auburn, Mass, and my mom is still alive. She'll be 98 this year. Well, next year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I think she'll make 100. So, But in any case, the adjustment was relatively quick and easy. And, there really hasn't been any, you read about some people adjusting to life in different countries and, and again, the immigrant story here is a very, very good story because, this country is wide open. So if you're ambitious, if you want to work hard, if you're willing to be educated, if you're willing to take some risks, from a career standpoint to achieve other things, you can do that. And you can be rewarded for that. And I certainly took a few risks, not that many, but I took a risk by going to work for Cutler Williams in Dallas, which was a startup company. When I went to work for them, there were less than 30 people. And I was like living in Chicago. I had a good job with a big corporation. And I went with a startup. And I remember.
So did you go to Chicago from Massachusetts? Was that the first place that you lived?
Well, no. I went to college in Worcester. I went to graduate school at University of Maine.
Okay.
And my first job was in New York City. So I was in New York City, and EDS, which is now part of several corporations. Okay. And I think I said in my bio that the majority of what EDS was a very large company, one of the first companies to really do outsourcing, some of the new things that we're doing. A company run by a guy named Ross Perot, who's,
I loved Ross Perot.
Ross Perot was a little dude, but he was a guy who was very ambitious and
the giant sucking sound.
And it was a big. That's exactly it. He would have been a good dictator. Okay? But he had a kind heart. And Ross, so EDS transferred me to Chicago. So I wound up in Chicago as a result of a corporate transfer. So we made a decision that we were going to go anywhere if it helped my career. And as a result, we moved from New York to Chicago. And then in Chicago, I joined Cutler Williams.
Okay. So
I took a big risk because people were calling me up saying, did you get your paycheck? And I would say, well, yeah. They said, well, go. This is back in the days where you had paychecks, right? Go cash it right now before they run out of money at the bank. So it was pretty wild. And the check's always cleared. I've never had a check bounce from Cutler Williams, but I stayed there for a better part of 20 years and pretty much held a lot of different positions within the company. I was in recruiting. I was in recruiting management. I was in sales. I was in sales management. I was in executive management, field operations. The company was sold in 1995 to what became ComSys and is now part of Manpower Experis. All these companies, wind up getting sold or go out of business or get merged into somebody else. But I was happy enough to participate in that blessed time when these companies were actually worth money.
Right.
And there were money on Wall Street. There were Wall Street people looking for companies to buy, and they had money to buy them. So, and a lot of companies that you may remember, John. A lot of these different companies, like Computer Horizons and Cyber and Renaissance and some of the other ones, those companies all actually went public. They're all out of business right now.
Right.
It was a prelude to Y2K, and everybody thought, Y2K would provide them with an opportunity to go out and sell more business. Well, that's not what happened. And, there was actually a drop in the business in 2000 because people were disillusioned. They spent all this money and they got scared about the Y2K effects, and actually nothing happened.
Right.
So they were like, "What? We've been gullible. We've been told by these consultants that we're going to have all kinds of, crashes and trains crashing.
Airplanes are going to fall out of the sky.
Falling out of the sky, and none of that happened.
Right.
So there was a reaction, and the reaction was kind of a counter-cyclical reaction to the business. So the business, kind of got hurt. But But, that was a great event, okay, because what happened is I participated in, buying and selling of companies. I worked for the acquirer for a couple of years after that. We went through a public offering, a brand new public offering. I got to participate in that, in the show, where you go out and talk to investors about why they should buy your stock. I was involved in a couple of secondary offerings where they offer additional stock or offer additional debt. And I worked directly and indirectly at times for the owner of the company. His name was Mike Willis, who was one of these big Texas guys, who would, Mike had great stories. He was a scratch golfer.
Did he wear a big hat?
He wore a big hat. He actually had. And he had cattle too. He wasn't just a cat, just all hat, no cattle. He actually had cattle. Mike is still alive. His name is Mike Willis, and if you Google him, he's had a lot of success in business. He's had a few failures, but overall, he was one of these guys. He was like a general. He was a builder.
Yeah, if you're in business long enough, you don't have some failures, then you're lying.
Right. No, he was one of these guys who he really didn't have the patience to be an operator. He didn't want to be dealing with people and customers, and he just wanted to go out and acquire companies and build businesses and tell people how great it was going to be. And I remember going on a roadshow with him a couple of times, and he's telling these guys, we bought your company because you've got great management and you guys are terrific, and we need people like you. And we actually had people from one of the acquisitions show up at a meeting thinking they were taking over the company, because Mike blew all the smoke and they all swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. So it was a pretty funny story. But the part about that, there was a single time I think in this business that I've seen, and other people have commented on, where there was plenty of financial folks pursuing these kinds of companies. All of a sudden there was interest. Okay. Right now it's pretty hard to go public as a services company unless you've got some huge operation offshore. I noticed one of your speakers is from Rimini Street. That's a company that's been put together again. Yep. I don't know if they're public or private. I think they're private.
They're public
right?
now. They're public now.
Public now. But again, the scale is really much bigger than what the companies were able to go public with last time. If you had 70, 80, or $100 million worth of revenue, you could go public. Now it's probably need at least 2 or 3 billion. So anyway, it's a different kind of a business environment.
So, question for you: I've been in the staffing industry a long time, but then I run into people like you, been at it for a long, long time. So, people always ask me, what's changed in the industry over the years? Not just what it used to be like for the money and stuff like that. What really has changed in the industry that you've seen that's been the biggest game changer?
Well, there's a couple of things really. One is that it's gotten bigger. If you go to any corporation of any size, or any company for that matter of any size, even small companies, every one of these companies is now using outside services.
Right.
Back when I started out with EDS, you had to convince people that it was in their interest to use outside services. They don't want outsiders. They wanted their own employees. And, now using what I would call the variable workforce concept is pretty much ingrained in American companies. Every company's budget includes fees for, consulting services, staffing services, professional services. And so the market is huge, probably 10, 15, 20 times bigger than it was, 30, 40 years ago. The other thing that's made a big difference, the other thing that I've seen different is that there is really a whole lot more competition for the same dollar. Right. And it's not just the little companies. It's not just the people that have, 30, 40, 50 billable people or $5 or $6 million worth of revenue. It's pretty much everybody. You're competing with, Accenture, and you're competing with offshore. You're competing with nearshore companies. You're competing with companies that are virtual. One of my competitors, one of my accounts, is a company that's based in the Ukraine. They have no people in this. They have no people in the States. Right. On occasion, they'll have a person who flies up here and meets with them, but their contact is really all virtual, just like you and I are doing. That's how they operate. That's how they work, and it seems to work for them. So I think those are two big differences: the size, the amount of the market's exploded. The market's huge, and I'm saying for the future, the population trends, okay, the technology trends bode very, very well, okay. And there's some things happening right now, as you know. There's been a lot of pressure not to bring in H1s. Yeah. So there's much fewer H1 folks coming over to this country. And that's putting an added premium on the people who are already here.
And for people that don't understand what Rich is talking about, H-1B visas are a work visa that people from outside of the U.S. get these H-1B visas, and that allows them to come into the U.S. to work, not being a green card holder or a U.S. citizen. So I just wanted to clarify that for people that might not know what an H-1B visa is.
Most of the H-1s are from India.
Right.
And the reason why that is because India uses English in their education system. So majority of these folks speak passable English. Some of them are excellent in English, but they all speak English. So that's different than most of the other countries. Now, other countries are doing the same thing. But so what I'm saying is that long term, you're going to need more people. And I think the model is translating more and more into using variable workforces. Companies don't want to have, 300 IT folks. Okay, they might want to have 30 or 40, and the rest is going to be consultants. Right. The other thing is some of the tasks are getting commoditized. Testing, coding. You still need business analysts to understand the business and translate the requirements into something that could be automated. But a lot of those tasks are starting to get very, very repetitive. And automation is also a huge changer. We're still in our infancy in automation. I'm not talking about automatic code generators, but I'm talking about automation in testing, automation in development, automation in infrastructure, maintenance of your system. People are very, very advanced in some of these things. And I guess, I wouldn't, maybe in 10 years, okay, it'll be again a whole lot different. But somebody told me that automation is going to replace people. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think you're going to need people, and you're going to need people maybe to do different things. But, until machines can think logically and clearly and make snap decisions about different things on a regular basis, you're going to need people. So I think the future's bright. If you're in a business right now, and whether it's staffing, and I know people say, well, staffing has gotten very commoditized. Well, that's true because it's a lot more competition. But on the other hand, you also have a lot more business opportunities.
So, Rich, that's a great point, and it brings me up to why I put together this podcast. I'm also writing a book right now, and it's called True Ambition. So I read this quote years ago, about 5 years ago, that says that true ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the profound desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God. Now, I've always been ambitious, but before I read that quote, I think I was ambitious for the wrong reasons. Going after power, money, women, whatever it was back in my younger days. Now I think that I'm going after the right things. And what you just said reminded me of why I loved working for you so much, and Dave and some of the other people that kind of led me in the right direction in the not only business, but in the staffing industry, because you guys were so positive. And I think that if you just work hard and give people the right things, which is we're doing nothing but solving problems for people in the IT staffing industry. They've got a problem. We as recruiters, as staffing people, as whatever you want to call us, we're coming in and solving a problem for them. If we do that over and over and over again, and we just stay positive like you've always been, then we're going to be successful. So what you just said just kind of reminded me of that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So
well said, John.
What I wanted to talk about is when we went out to have dinner when I was in Minnesota, we'd go out and have appetizers, have a few beers. Everybody always said, "Are you going to pull a Brzozy?" Because Rich Brzozy would order every appetizer on the menu, and it was awesome. And I do that every time I take my team out now. I pull a Brzozy, and I all right, see all those appetizers? I'll take every one of them. I learned that from you, my friend, and it's a great move because everybody's always totally satisfied with every appetizer on there. So I always pull a Brzozy when I'm taking the team out.
Good.
So,
John, I did that for the same reason you're doing it. Okay, one, it gives people a chance to, really kind of sort of loosen up a little bit after work.
Yep.
It gives people a chance to talk about work in a non-work setting, and it gives everybody a chance to get to know each other. And that's how you build a team. You build a team by people who are strangers, who go home to different situations at home, who go home to different circumstances, but who at the same time have to work as a team. And, a lot of that is team building, and a lot of people who don't do that, especially in companies that have as intense, even though the future is bright, this is still a hard business. It's a business where you get disappointed, you get customers who don't tell you the truth, you get prospects who don't tell you the truth, you have people who accept an offer and don't show up, you have all of that going on. So you got to have a team spirit, and you got to have some level of reinforcement so that when something negative happens to you, you're not the only one it happens to. You have things you can share with people and you can talk with people. And we had a very good camaraderie. And that's the word that's probably more fitting than some of the other words. We had a camaraderie, and everybody understood what the job was to get the job done. And if something didn't work, then you could always ask your workmate for help, and we would offer help. But it was also a reward. It was a reward for work well done and hard work. If we were failing, I wouldn't have had the latitude to do that.
Well, we must have been doing okay because we always had the latitude to do whatever we wanted to.
Nobody was rejecting those expense reports.
I remember one time I had a big month or a big year, whatever it was, and you said, have John jump on a plane and come to Chicago. And you and I and Mark went out. I ended up staying at your house. This is a funny story. I'm going to go deep on this one. So I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had had way too many drinks, and I ended up going and using the bathroom. I got lost in your house in my underwear, and I ended up sleeping on a leather couch, freezing my butt off. And somebody in the middle of the night ended up coming out and putting a blanket over top of me. Thank God. But I remember wandering around the house going, I have no idea where I'm going. So I just laid down on the couch and went to sleep.
Well, like I said, we had some good times.
Oh, we had some great times. Question for you. Are you still running? I remember you running all the time.
Well, John, I'm walking.
Okay, me too.
I try to walk 5 miles a day. I'm not saying I always succeed, but I do. I walk and run. About, 7 or 8 years ago, I had I developed, it was basically, I was running.
Yeah.
I was heavier, and I continued running. As a consequence, I developed plantar fasciitis, which is one of those, your feet hurt, it has to do with, you can do either operations or you can do, or you can quit running. So I quit running. So I quit running for about a year or so. By the time that I came back out of that, I was really not in shape to run. But I do walk, and walking is just as good. It's good cardiovascular exercise. It's good for your head. It's good to get out of the house. We've had a beautiful fall here. I go, like, after this, I'll go out and probably go for an hour or two, go for a walk, enjoy the scenery. Enjoy the fall weather.
Are all the leaves turning back there right now?
And it's a very good therapeutic thing for your head, because all of us are working from home. You're working from home. You're on the phone. You're on a conference call. You're talking to people, but it's still not the same thing.
Right.
So it's kind of sort of but it also gives you a little more freedom. I get my work done, at 3:00 or 3:30, but sometimes I'll have a call at 6 or 7. You know how that is. I mean, this is not a business where you work 9 to 5. You pretty much work all the time.
Now you're a Bears fan, so you're much happier this year than I am being a Minnesota Vikings fan.
Only temporarily. The Bears can give you a heart attack. I'm glad I have no cardiac issues. There was the first game. I turned the TV off. I'm like, they're done. They're cooked, and they won. I was like, whoa.
Well, the game I just watched for the Vikings, all we had to do was kick a field goal, and we won the game, but the coaching staff decided not to kick a field goal.
Well, the Vikings are a good team.
Yeah, they're a good team, but they're making some piss-poor choices this year.
Well, did you notice, John, that they're playing a soundtrack, a fan soundtrack?
Yeah. Yeah, yay!
It sounds like a stadium full of people and it's empty,
So like I said before, Rich, you were always one of the nicest guys and a huge influence and mentor to me.
Well, thank you.
Who are some of the people or persons in your career who were inspirations to you or mentors to you?
Well, one of them, Steve Claggett, who was, our boss. He was an executive vice president.
Awesome guy.
He was the number 2 guy in the company. And he dealt with us like we were equal, his friends. But at the same time, we never lost, the respect that this position was due. Mm-hmm. And he believed in rewarding people for doing the right thing. And he believed in holding you accountable. So he was very good at celebrating success and telling you, how to fix the problem next time. Yeah. Steve never dealt in blaming you. He was not one of these guys that would, hold a grudge or blame you for something. If you did something wrong, he'd call you in his office and say, or call you on the phone and say, what are we doing to fix it? And I've had a number of examples where he just absolutely, he was great. And he sent me to Seattle. We were getting thrown off the vendor list over at AT&T, which at the time was the biggest customer we had in Seattle. And he sent me there because he wanted me to see if we could salvage the situation because we couldn't afford to lose a big customer. And I called him and said, we're out. We're not in. Somebody else could have said, what happened? Why'd you fail? Tell me why you failed. He said, go back to them and give it another try. I said, but they told us to go away. He said, get in there and tell them that, you're going to give it another try. So the next day I was in the office. I was in the office around 5:30 in the afternoon. I picked up the phone, called the head guy in HR at AT&T. He picked up the phone. I had an audience. Next day we were in. So his only comment was, see, I told you.
That's awesome.
But he was a good mentor. He was a very good mentor and a very good person. And, I've had a couple of other people who I think were very, very good. And actually, there's a guy that I work with here at CAI, whose name is Steve Daly, who worked with us at Agilent, if you remember.
Okay, I remember the name.
He was in charge of one of the practices. Another great guy, great mentor, very positive guy. Another guy who, instead of dealing with blame, dealt with how do we fix the problem, right, and what do we do? And, didn't play favorites, didn't play politics, and it wasn't just one of these guys who would he was accessible. You could talk to him. And some of the things that you talked about, honesty, integrity, all those things were inherent in the way those guys operated. I trusted them. They had your back. One of the imperatives in business is when you work for somebody, you have to be able to trust the fact that they will handle the back end. because if they let you flap in the wind or criticize you or say that you're not doing a good job, then you're really not. I mean, whether you've done a good job or not. But there are people for political reasons do those kinds of things. And it really, really gets you down in a situation where you can't win.
Well, it's a great point, because one of the things that drives me crazy in the staffing business is I've worked at different places where there's been the finger of blame pointed from either the sales to the recruiters or the recruiters to the sales. And that's one of the things that I set up, Carissa and I set up in IT Avalon that just won't be permitted, is that we're a team here. We have to work together. If someone's pointing the finger, I will bite that finger off, because it does not exist inside of here. I've had many times where, you know me, I came from recruiting. So I've got 26 years of recruiting experience. And I've had salespeople trying to blame me for something that was going on. And I'm like, what the hell did I do? I can't control what's going on at the client.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just like, that'd be like me pointing at them going, it's your fault because your client didn't show up at the interview. We have no control. These are people. So if we all work together in a common thread towards a goal that we can all work together to achieve, there's no stopping us. But once you get that thing where somebody doesn't have your back, isn't on your team, something like that, where there's some kind of political reason why they're trying to point a finger of blame, you're done. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
A good leader handles those issues, and that was another characteristic of the people that I've said I've worked with.
Big time.
If someone went to them and said Rich Brzozy did something wrong, what they would say is go to Rich Brzozy and tell Rich Brzozy.
Yeah.
If they said no, I don't want to go do that, or no, I'm not comfortable doing that, he would say, let me set up a meeting and we'll do that together. Okay. And the majority of those people would say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to set up a meeting. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to confront, Rich. And he would say, well, if you want to, I saw Claggett do that. Claggett said, if you don't want to confront them, then you shouldn't be coming to me and telling me that. If you really think that there's something that they're doing wrong, then you should resolve that with them. If you can't resolve it with them, I expect both of you to be in my office and we'll have a conversation. We'll talk about it.
Exactly.
And I don't think very many people ever showed up in his office together to complain. A few times I've seen that, but not. And those were really not very positive conversations, because by the time the people got to his office, somebody was going to quit anyway. And, they were just going to vent their frustration at whoever it was on the other end. But, they never took sides. Now I've been in companies where, you would go to my boss and say something about me, and my boss would go, well, okay, John. And they would keep score, right? And then 6 months later, I would hear something about, well, somebody came to me and said, you did X, Y, Z. Okay. And I would say, well, how come you didn't come to me earlier? Or why didn't you talk to me earlier?
Right.
No, I had this happen with acquisitions, where people from the acquisitions would be unhappy about something and they would blame me because I was representative of the company that purchased them. Well, he's not communicating the good things about the company to us. So I would say, and I had a guy who was just like that as a boss, who would say, well, people aren't hearing the good news of, the company from you. They're not hearing the good news that we're doing things for them, or we're helping them integrate, or we're helping them with the acquisition or the cultural fit and all the other things that go on. And I would say, well, what are the specifics? If you could share specifics with me, tell me what the specifics are that they're complaining about. Well, I really can't divulge any confidences. And I would say, well, then don't talk to me about it.
Right.
If you can't tell me who's saying what about me, it's like politics, right? We're not in a political environment, which probably that stuff is fair and square, we're in a business, it's a business. I'm not here, for personal reasons. I'm here because, I work here.
Can you imagine being in politics? What a shit show.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. I don't care what party you're with, even if you're not,
It's garbage, man. I stopped watching the news. I stopped going on social media a long time ago because I just there's just no room for me to be out there watching all that crap.
I don't have anybody on social media who's posting political things, but there are people that I know personally who are really not bad people that get crazed with that stuff. They keep posting stuff. No intention to denigrate anybody or any party. But I was reading about Mike Pompeo releasing, Hillary Clinton's tapes because, they contain some salacious information. Well, Hillary Clinton lost the campaign in 2016. I felt like writing a note, on social media saying, hey, I found out Eleanor Roosevelt's, underwear or something, like who cares? Or somebody who lost the election, or Michael Dukakis's, pictures or whatever. I mean, why would you care about Hillary Clinton?
Yeah.
That's how many years ago? 4 years ago, right?
I watched. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there's it's called The Social Dilemma. I watched it on Netflix, and it's all about these large, Google, Facebook, all these large companies, and how their algorithms work to keep people on social media. And what it says in this show, is that everybody on social media gets fed all this information in this algorithm to keep them on social media. So they're just feeding you all this information that you already believe in. So you think no matter what side you're on, that's the way everybody thinks. So if you're on the left, you think the people on the right are crazy. And if you're on the right, you think the people on the left are crazy. And they just keep on feeding all this information in there. And it's just, it's a recipe for what's going on right now.
My daughter's in-laws, okay, I can't talk to them about politics.
No, it's nuts, dude.
In fact, one of them was so upset with me that she, this is in the summer, we're sitting outside and, it's a nice day and they asked me what I thought. And I said, do you really want to know? Because if I tell you, they said, oh, no, tell us. They were upset.
That's why I never bring it up. We'll be sitting around a fire pit or something like that and people be talking. I just keep my mouth shut because it doesn't really matter anyway. I'm like, I'm not going to change anybody's mind.
It is really a sideshow, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I decided a while ago that I'm going to take care of my business. I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to take care of my local community, and everything else, it's outside of my range. I'll do what I need to do.
Politics by its nature is local. Okay, social media and TV's made it national.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, 40 years ago, it wouldn't have mattered what happened in, California, maybe. At a local level. Now it's broadcast and promulgated throughout so people know what's going on, and I was reading an article yesterday about some guy who was a Trump supporter shoved a non-Trump supporter. I'm like, we would have never known that 40 years ago.
Right.
If they would have shot each other, we probably wouldn't have known that. Now
everybody knows about it.
Yeah, it was some town in Oregon or something that I never heard of, but they were protesting on a street and somebody shoved somebody, so they wrote it and it hit the national news.
Well, you know what the story should be? Two idiots shoving each other.
That's two idiots out protesting whatever they thought they were protesting.
Yeah. Two people don't have jobs.
Or if they have jobs, they're really part-time.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. But I think two things about social media. I think one is that it's really made the point that it's becoming more global. I mean, global in a sense that you and I instantly know what's going on pretty much all around the world because it gets printed or videotaped or, somehow promulgated much quicker and faster than through newspapers or through whatever traditional other channels.
Right.
And the second thing, I think overall it's a force for good because it does provide people access to ideas that they might not have had otherwise. Okay, think about all the people in India or all the people in third world countries that look at the internet and they see things that otherwise they never would have seen, and maybe they aspire to them. It's also a means for education. So all of a sudden you have all of this information coming at them, which otherwise would have never, they never would have gotten it. Okay. I mean, I was watching something a few months ago about India, and India is still not electrified. A lot of India, and I can't remember how much of India is not electrified, but a good chunk, like more than 50%, doesn't have electricity.
Right.
But what they do have is they have generators. So they have a generator, they have an antenna, and they have internet. And these people can come in and they can watch, whatever it is you and I watch, and they have access to their relatives who may be in other parts of the country or other parts of the world for that matter. And all of a sudden, they're part of they're part of the world, which otherwise they would not have been. But the negative aspects of social media is that it allows people to spread lies. Doctored videos. Some of the crazy videos that I've seen, they get photoshopped.
Oh yeah, they call it the deep fake.
Deep fake.
And
some of them are humorous, and some of them are just downright disgusting. It's like, come on, Well,
I had a question. We only got a few minutes left here. I wanted to ask you a question. I want to kind of go into a personal thing. This whole podcast is really to help people out. So I know when I met you, you were married to your first wife, and
correct.
When I met her, I'll never forget meeting her in your house there in Naperville, and she had a big smile on her face. She was bedridden because she had MS. And I wanted to talk about that just a little bit because I think that'll help some people out. What was her name? I can't remember her name. Lorraine, that's right. What a beautiful lady she was. Now, when did you find out? How old were you and how old was she when she found out that she had MS?
I was 2 years older than her. So she was in her early 30s and I was in my mid 30s. So I was like 35. She was like 33.
Okay.
And she was first diagnosed.
And how old were the kids?
Oh, the kids were little kids. They were in grade school. Okay. For the first 4 or 5 years, up until about, 42, 43, she could function and drive and do pretty much everything that, you should be able to do. By the time, so one of the reasons I moved from Dallas to Chicago was because MS is heat sensitive.
Oh, okay.
And Dallas is a hot place. At the end of the day. So she could not handle the heat, and the heat caused disability to be worse than it would have been in the Midwest climate. And you're from the Midwest, so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, big time.
So when I had an opportunity to move to Chicago, she was like all over me, let's move. But it's a progressive disease. So what happens is that, day one, you don't get like bedridden. It takes, so over, 20 years or so, she wound up losing more control. She wound up getting more debilitated. She wound up using the wheelchair. Then she got to a point where she couldn't even at the end control the wheelchair. She didn't have the strength in her arms. But she always had cognition. There was never any cognition issues. She could always talk. And she was one of these rare people that believed in a cure. So on day one, she said, when are we going to have the cure? The last day, she said, I'm waiting for the cure. And it made life with her a lot easier than it would have been otherwise because she was not a complainer. She accepted the situation and made the best of it and allowed me to continue with my business career without a whole lot of disruption. I had to do some things where I had some people that I had to hire from a housekeeping standpoint and taking care of her standpoint. But overall, and you know that because you saw me, there were a few instances where, there were some issues, but overall, it was really just not a problem. MS is not a disease that will kill you. MS will cause side effects that will kill you. And it could be symptoms like COPD. She didn't have COPD, but it weakens your overall system. So when your lungs are not strong, you're not breathing, it's like having COPD because you can't get enough oxygen.
Right.
Issues like inability to walk, or being disabled, or being wheelchair bound. So gradually, every person that has MS, and it's really kind of like a cancer. Every person has an individual course of the disease. So it's not like everybody gets the same kind of a course. In her case, she would gradually, slowly, over time, get debilitated. There are people that have spikes. They have debilitation. They stay in bed. They get well. But each spike, they get worse. Okay. Then there are people that will have it and never change the course. There are people that will pass away and they'll do an autopsy and find out that person had MS and have lesions of MS in the brain, and that person never knew they had MS. So it's one of those crazy diseases where now they have much better drugs now than they had before.
Right.
When she was first diagnosed, all I had is steroids, which is it's essentially a disease where your white blood cells attack your body. Your white blood cells, instead of recognizing that your body is not the enemy, attack your body. So it attacks your brain. And sclerosis it causes little scars in the neurons. It eats away the fatty substance called myelin, and it causes a kind of a scar. So in other words, if your nerves are sheathed in that fatty substance called myelin, it strips away the myelin and causes the nerves to misfire, which is why people get debilitated, which is why they get more and more unable to control their feet, control it's a crazy disease. There's symptoms. We've seen people who are blind as a result of that. We've seen people that have had they could not use their hands, but would be perfectly okay otherwise.
So one of my questions behind it is, for people who are dealing with family members who have these kind of either prognosis or disease or something like that, there had to be times where you were like, damn it. It's just like you got to sit there and go, why her? Why me? Why the kids? Why do we have? How do you get through those points? Because I know for me, I would go, God, why is this happening? Life is so good right now. Why is this happening to me?
But John, it's like anything else. You wind up dealing with it. Okay.
Right.
Like I said, it's not a precipice kind of a thing. It's not like you're well and all of a sudden you're not. It's like you're well and then you're gradually not well. So it's almost like you kind of get used to this, right? So when I bought the house here in Illinois, I knew that she was still able to walk with a walker and still able to get around. But I knew that at some point she was going to be able to do that. So I had to buy a house on one floor, which in Illinois, at least in this area, is very hard to do. Most people build up.
Yep.
So we had to find a ranch, and we had to find a ranch where, there was easy access from a wheelchair standpoint. So, for the first 2.5, 3 years we lived in this house, she never had to use a wheelchair. Then she started using a wheelchair every now and then. Then all of a sudden it became, so you kind of gradually ease into that. Okay. And then you build up your support structure. And, and again, business taught me how to organize things. So I was able to get a, live-in person for her companion. I had a lady who lived with us for 16 years. Okay. Before she passed away. So, that lady was, she'd come in the house. She knew what to do, from the day she walked in to the time she walked out, and she would basically take care of the household. I mean, I'd pay the bills and they would take care of everything else, the cooking, the shopping, everything else was pretty much taken care of. Now I paid for that, but it was a lot easier than, quitting work. Okay. So I was very fortunate that the financial circumstances allowed me to do that. But you solve it gradually. and it's almost like you wind up not thinking about it. And you didn't see that. I mean, you saw me in action when this was going on. I mean, it wasn't like it was controlling my life.
No, and that's why I kind of wanted to ask about it and talk about it, because if I wouldn't have met Lorraine, if I wouldn't have known you as well as I did, you would never know something like that was going on, because you, Lorraine, everybody, and maybe it was because of her strength that you're talking about it. That
John, I'll make a point here. I know you well enough to know that you have personal resilience. I know that you're flexible. I know that you're an intelligent guy, and I know that you're a good person. You think good thoughts. Okay.
Yep.
You love somebody. That person winds up getting ill. You're going to figure out how to take care of them. Okay.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's almost that simple. Okay. I was never one that sat around and said, woe unto me, because it's a misfortune. I was always thankful that I had, a good job. I had good people to work with. One of the things that made my career so interesting is I worked with some really neat people, both on the employee side and the management side. And I have I have a lot of friends who are former employees of, who've worked for me or worked with me. And I was always a work with kind of a person. So some of the life lessons that, I learned in business, I applied to this situation. And, I was fulfilled at work. I got my job done. I got paid well. I made some money. I went to some interesting places. Unfortunately, she couldn't go with me to some of these places. But, I basically lived a very, very good life. And at the same time, she did too.
Right.
So I didn't let circumstances just kind of sort of get me to a point where I was saying, woe unto me. I mean, every once in a while you're saying, this sucks.
Well, you've got to. It's a human thought, and it's
human nature.
It's human nature. Yeah.
There was some frustration here and there. And I was thinking, how long is this going to go on? And then when she passed away, I was like, what do I do next? Because it was like your life's empty, right? I mean, because you've set up everything. You've got this machine built that is functioning, as well as it can, because it's greased, right? You fix all the problems. You've got these people who you've engaged with. I had doctors, nurses, people that provided, massage therapy, therapists. I mean, I had people, I had all these people engaged. All of a sudden that was like the precipice, right? I got to a point like, boom. So I remember the first couple of weeks felt really weird, because I didn't have to have somebody here, to take care of her. Fortunately I have a good family, a good supportive family. And, that probably was even harder to get through at first than maybe some of the other things that happened at the front end. But thank you for asking. Seriously, I think the way you deal with it is like you would deal with anything else. You apply all the life lessons you've learned, and you're a committed guy. You would make sure it worked.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, I consider myself lucky that I got a chance to meet Lorraine. And it was, I'll never forget the big smile on her face, and she was so nice to me.
Well, she was happy to see people. Okay. Yeah. That's one of the things about her that was different maybe than some of the other people I've seen who have a chronic illness. They don't want to see anybody. They just don't want to be left alone. Okay.
Yeah.
And they want to be lost in their environment. She was very welcoming, very open. I could bring anybody over anytime, at any time of day and night, have them stay over, and she'd be like, great.
Well, now you're remarried. I see that you got grandbabies.
I've got 4 grandkids.
Yes. And how old are the grandkids?
Well, my son has two boys, 19 and 17. So I've got 2 big guys. And then my daughter just had a baby. And it's an interesting story about her. They were having difficulties, so they went through surrogacy.
Yeah.
As soon as they paid the money for surrogacy, and surrogacy is big bucks.
Right.
As soon as they went through surrogacy, she got pregnant. You knew the answer.
Well, no, same thing.
So she wound up having a baby boy, and and then a month later, the surrogate had a baby girl.
So they almost got twins.
She has twins. She's got two little kids now. She's calling me today because she's having some issues at work, trying to manage the kids and work, and she works virtually. But I'm just saying, at the same time, she's like, I don't know if I can handle this, and I'm saying, well, go figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Work with your manager. Call her up again. I was thinking about Claggett, and I was like, Claggett, just go in there and talk to them again.
Yeah, get it figured out.
And John, I couldn't say to him, well, what if they don't talk to me? I had to say, yes, sir, Steve. I'll show up there in the morning, So it was all good. But thank you for asking about Lorraine. And I think that, if there is any kind of a lesson there, is that you got to be positive. You got to have a positive outlook. And I knew at some point in time, and then that was always kind of sort of a gnawing, knowledge I had. I knew that she was going to pass on. And I knew that it was going to be within, who knows, right? She could have lived for another 20 years, but it was inevitable. And I think at the end she was kind of relieved. And, it was a very non-event. It wasn't like, she was in pain or she was in a hospital or she was unconscious. She went to sleep, next morning didn't wake up. And I didn't hear anything, I slept in the same room, I didn't hear anything, and I assumed everything. And she looked peaceful. I thought she was awake. In fact, I think when I woke up, it took me a while to figure out that, she was gone. I was like, hey, wake up, But anyway, no, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, well, it's something that I think can help a lot of people out because we're all going to go through those kind of situations. Not maybe the same situation, but there's only a few promises in this world, and that's things are going to change always.
And John, it's a situation you can't do anything about. And the problem with people that I've seen is people get involved in situations they can't do anything about, and they spend time worrying and ruining, their health in some cases, really, really getting themselves into a position where they become unhealthy because they're so worried about some other person being not healthy. They wind up making mistakes from an economic standpoint, quit their job to take care of a parent or something without thinking through what that means. Can they afford to do that? Is that something they can manage? Or just, really go into a depression, which also, I guess, is a health issue, a major health issue.
Yeah, big time. Mostly now in COVID, there's so many people who are dealing with depression, alcoholism, drugs, because they're in a situation that you can't control. None of us can control this.
You can't. You can't. And, it's almost silly to say do the best you can, which is really what you might say about a lot of other things. But, with COVID, you got to manage that the best you can. And you got to follow the guidelines. I go to a store, I wear a mask. I go outside, I don't, go into, all the bars are closed anyway, right? So I don't go, we don't go out to eat. We haven't been out to eat since probably sometime in March, early March, when this whole thing kind of sort of hit.
Right.
Because prior to that, in February, we were still doing, get-togethers and parties. I remember on February 28th, we had a going-away party for somebody, And, we knew about COVID back then, but it wasn't like COVID was, a serious thing. And, the Illinois governor, like him or not, has done a pretty good job of managing, the opening and shutting and closing and all of that. So, if you're in a bar business, you're probably not doing too well. I don't care who you are, you're probably not doing too well. If you're in a restaurant business, you're probably not doing too well. That section of the economy is really going to take a long time to recover. But I think, if you own Amazon stock, you're doing great.
Right. So I think that's about all we got for time here.
John, it was a pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate you taking the time.
You're looking great.
You too.
You're looking fit and happy and young and all of that good stuff.
I got to stay young, man. I got a 2-year-old at home, bro.
Well, that
Here's a funny thing. When Johnny graduates high school, I'll be 64 years old. So I gotta stay as young as I can.
You're going to be a young man when he graduates high school. 64, John. Listen. When I was 60, I felt like I was 40. I feel like I'm 40 today.
That's right. Well, that's why I love you, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Enjoyed it. Glad to do it.
You're the best,
and
man.
Best of luck to you and Carissa, and congratulations.
Sounds good. Reach out to Dave Andrasco. He'd love to hear from you.
I will call Dave and talk to him about his dad. Okay.
All right. Sounds good, my friend. I'll talk to you later.
John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The True Ambition podcast is brought to you by IT Avalon. For more information and links to other episodes, please visit www.trueambition.org. Now, go find your true ambition.